The world was on the brink of destruction. Zombies had taken over almost every corner of the planet. In these desperate times, a group of brave individuals was assigned a dangerous mission to crack open an old safe hidden in the heart of a deserted city. It was rumored that the safe held a fortune so massive it could change the fate of 7 future generations. But this mission was far from easy. Death was waiting for them at every turn. Meet Sebastian, a weary banker frustrated with his dull life. The only thing that brought him peace was his fascination with legendary safes and the mysteries surrounding them. He would often talk about them on his YouTube channel. One night, he made a video about 4 legendary safes created by Hans Wagner, a passionate craftsman who didn't treat safes like machines but as puzzles. His entire world revolved around 2 things: his family and his work. But when tragedy struck and he lost his family, he poured all his sorrow into his masterpiece, a series of 4 safes that felt more mythical than mechanical. The safes were called the Rheingold, the Valkyrie, the Siegfried, and the Götterdämmerung, all named after Richard Wagner's famous opera cycle. Each safe was designed with hidden secrets, and legend had it that if anyone tried to open them by force, their contents would burn to ashes, and the safe would seal forever. But Hans Wagner didn't stop there. He built one final safe, the ultimate embodiment of his pain, loneliness, and grief. He sealed himself inside that last creation. Despite several attempts by workers to open it, they failed. That safe became his tomb, and it was eventually sunk into the depths of the ocean. To this day, the Rheingold, the Valkyrie, and the Siegfried are believed to be somewhere out there, their locations still a mystery. No one knows what became of the Götterdämmerung. Sebastian proudly referred to himself as a super safe cracker in all his videos and often showcased his finger skills like a magician. He uploaded the Hans Wagner video just like always, but once again, not a single view. The next afternoon, while back at work after lunch, he got a notification. Someone had not only watched his video, but had left a comment too. It read, "If you want to test your skills, come to the last house on Lifesucker Street at 8 p.m. Use the back door. Password, Götterdämmerung." Bored with his mundane routine, Sebastian decided to take the chance. He reached the location, gave the password, and was led inside, into the basement where a secret safe-cracking tournament was taking place. Turns out, everyone there had been waiting for the final contestant, Sebastian himself. As soon as he arrived, the competition began. At first, Sebastian was completely confused, but once he understood what was happening, he jumped in and began cracking safes just like the others. Only 4 contestants could qualify for the next round. One by one, they earned their spots. The fight for the last place was intense, but Sebastian pulled it off. In the next round, even more difficult safes were brought in. By this point, gamblers had started betting on their favorite participants. The crowd grew more excited as the next challenge began. They eagerly awaited the first finalist. The safe now had a double lock. A competitor named Neo cracked it first. Sebastian became the second finalist. Throughout the tournament, the mysterious girl who brought Sebastian here had her eyes locked on him. The final match was set for 3 minutes. If neither cracked the safe in time, the match would end in a draw. As soon as the buzzer rang, Neo quickly got to work, while Sebastian spent the first 2.5 minutes simply analyzing and figuring things out. The audience had almost given up on him. But then, Sebastian pulled off the impossible. He cracked the safe in just 7 seconds. The room exploded with applause. For someone whose videos never even got a single view, this moment felt like pure magic. For the first time in his life, he felt truly seen. He was a genius safecracker. That night, he met Gwendoline, the girl who had left the comment on his video and entered his name in the tournament. She had been a thief since childhood. By the time she was 17, she had already committed crimes so big that 17 countries were after her. Now, she was planning one final heist that could change their lives forever. Forever. She told Sebastian about a zombie outbreak. Because of the infection, Hans Wagner's safes were soon to be transported to a vault in Geneva, giving them just 96 hours to pull off the impossible. They had one last chance to solve the puzzle Wagner had spent his life creating. Their plan was simple: open the Rheingold, then the Valkyrie, and finally, the Siegfried. That meant 3 international heists in just 4 days. If everything went right, they'd be rich beyond imagination. To Sebastian, this was more than a mission. It was an exciting challenge. Though he still found the idea a bit crazy, Gwendoline handed him a card before leaving, hoping he'd change his mind. And change his mind, he did. After another long day of rude customers at the bank, Sebastian finally decided to join the team. However, he was still terrified of zombies. He was so scared, he even started seeing them in his dreams. Now imagine, someone that scared joining a deadly heist. Just the thought is enough to make anyone laugh. The heist crew had 5 members: Corinna, the hacker, and tech genius. Rolf, the driver who could make a car fly like a rocket. Brad Cage, the aggressive weapons expert. Gwendoline, the fearless leader who planned every move. And finally, Sebastian, the safe-cracking prodigy. Over the last 3 years, they had discovered the locations of all 3 safes. The first, Rheingold, was hidden in a small bank in Paris. The first safe, Rheingold, had around 4 billion possible combinations. Among the 3 legendary safes, this was considered the easiest to crack, not just because of its design, but also because it was kept inside a children's bank with almost zero security. The second safe, Valkyrie, was stored inside a high-security bank in the Czech Republic. This one had nearly 2.4 trillion possible combinations and held a massive fortune worth $40 million. It was more than enough to make them rich for life. But for Gwendoline, this wasn't just about money. She wanted to solve all 3 puzzles and establish herself as the queen of the underworld. The third safe, Siegfried, was hidden inside a luxury casino in St. Moritz, Switzerland. It had over a quadrillion possible combinations. Estimates said it contained close to 100 million. And the man who owned all 3 safes? None other than international crime lord Bly Tanaka, which meant if they were caught, no one would be able to save them. In the next scene, the crew arrived at the children's bank in Paris. Right outside the main gate stood an old security guard. Taking him down wasn't hard for Brad, but as soon as he pulled out his revolver, Sebastian's heart started racing. That's when Gwendoline reassured him. They weren't here to hurt anyone. The gun was just for intimidation. Meanwhile, Karina had already hacked into the bank's surveillance system and put earlier footage on a loop. Following the plan, Sebastian entered the bank first. His task was to head straight to the restroom and wait for further instructions. Locals often used the restroom, so no one would suspect him. Moments later, Gwendoline entered too and cleverly stole the guard's keys. Months ago, she had opened a fake locker in this bank, giving her a legitimate reason to access the locker room. Karina, on the other hand, distracted the bank teller, speaking nonsense in Chinese, while Gwendoline quietly led Sebastian to the vault. Inside the silent room, Sebastian took a deep breath. He gently ran his fingers over the lock and began to turn the dial with full concentration. The faint clicks and sounds from the inner metal discs whispered clues to him. A smile appeared on his face as he locked in the first disc. The second one raised the tension, but he didn't stop. His fingers were steady, his eyes focused like a laser. The whole world seemed to fade away, and then, click, the vault opened. He had cracked the Rheingold like it was nothing. Gwendoline's eyes widened at the sight of the cash-packed bundles inside. But Sebastian? He couldn't contain his joy. He threw his hands in the air and exclaimed, "I did it! I'm a genius!" They quickly filled their bags with the money. Brad and Rolf now jumped into action. Brad distracted the bankers, while Sebastian slipped out through the restroom with the cash-filled bag. A few seconds later, Gwendoline followed. Amazingly, the bank didn't even realize they had been robbed until the thieves were long gone. Soon after, Interpol launched a special task force to track them down. The operation was led by Delacroix, who had a long-standing grudge against Brad. For the past 5 years, Delacroix had been chasing Gwendoline's crew. In one of their earlier heists, Brad had even shot Delacroix's bomb, and he never forgot that humiliation. Now, with this zombie apocalypse as the backdrop, Delacroix finally understood what Gwendoline's team was really after: Hans Wagner's ring cycle safes. And since they had just cracked the Rheingold, their next target had to be Valkyrie. That meant Interpol still had 2 more chances to catch them. Meanwhile, Gwendoline's team partied all night, celebrating their success like rock stars. Karina even tried to flirt with Sebastian, but he was completely lost in love with Gwendoline, unaware that she was actually in a relationship with Brad. The next morning, the crew reached the high-security bank in Prague where Valkyrie was kept. But this time, Delacroix and his team were watching the bank closely. Sebastian was supposed to enter as a junior branch coordinator, while Gwendoline posed as his secretary. Both had fake IDs. They just had to flash them at the scanner, and right then, Karina would remotely log into the system, undetected, for exactly 16 seconds, then log out, and repeat this until Sebastian and Gwendoline reached the vault. Sebastian followed the instructions and messaged Karina before entering. She activated the login just in time and got him through the main gate. This bank was much larger, and its security was top-notch. But thanks to Karina's skills, Sebastian soon reached the main vault. Then she said, "Just pretend to unlock it. I'll open the real lock remotely." Sebastian nodded and started acting like he was cracking the lock. Moments later, the door opened automatically. Gwendoline was already inside. Together, they took the elevator to the lower floor. As the elevator doors opened, they were greeted by 2 armed guards standing watch near the vault. Without hesitation, Gwendoline launched into action and beat them down before they could even react. Who would have thought a 19-year-old girl could fight like that? Once both guards were unconscious, thanks to a little knockout spray, The room was clear. It was time to crack the Valkyrie. Just as Sebastian was preparing to work his magic again, Interpol suddenly stormed the bank, but the truth that came out left everyone stunned. The Valkyrie had already been moved to the bank's largest branch days ago, a location even more heavily secured. Back in the Czech branch, the guards— By now, the security team had grown suspicious of Sebastian. The way he unlocked the vault just by touching it raised too many questions. Within seconds, someone pressed the silent alarm. That meant the elevators would stay locked until the vault was fully inspected. But Gwen had already planned for such a situation. According to the backup plan, Brad had to stage a fake robbery inside the bank to draw all the security attention toward him. Brad executed the plan perfectly. In his very first move, he knocked out a few guards using a tranquilizer gun. The rest fell victim to his powerful punches and kicks. The next moment, he fired shots into the air, sending shockwaves of fear across the entire bank. Customers dropped to the floor, screaming in panic. Meanwhile, Sebastian failed in his first attempt. The vault's 3 dials immediately retracted inward. The locking mechanism had detected a forced unlocking attempt. Luckily, after a few seconds, one of the dials came back out again. But this time, there was no room for error. If he failed now, the vault would permanently lock. Sebastian took a deep breath, closed his eyes, and started turning the dial slowly, carefully listening to every tiny click. Just then, a guard triggered the emergency alarm, and the police were expected to arrive in exactly 10 minutes. Inside the bank, Brad had created utter chaos. Following his instructions, the cashier was frantically stuffing bundles of cash into a bag. And right at that moment, Sebastian cracked the vault open again, filled 2 bags with money, and slipped out. Brad, too, was escaping with a cash-filled bag when suddenly, a guard blocked his path at gunpoint. Thinking quickly, Brad threw the bag at him and dove to the ground. A fight broke out between them, and though Brad eventually overpowered the guard, he took a bullet during the struggle. Even then, he smashed through a window, jumped out, and in a rage, killed the guard who shot him. He ran straight to the getaway van. Seconds later, Sebastian and Gwen jumped in too. But just when everything seemed fine, Brad betrayed them. He shoved Sebastian out of the moving van and sped away with the cash. Now, the police were after Sebastian. A wild chase broke out across the streets, but somehow he managed to escape. Elsewhere, Gwen was furious. The plan had been crystal clear. Once the mission was complete, Sebastian was to be dropped off safely. And now, without him, cracking Siegfried would be impossible. But Brad didn't care. For him, the mission was already over. They now had enough money to never pull a job again. That's when Gwen lost it. "We were supposed to crack all 3 safes, Brad, in sequence. That was our legacy. You just ruined everything." Enraged, Gwen and Karina stormed out of the van. From that moment, their paths diverged. Gwen had made up her mind. She would pull off the next heist without Brad or Rolf, but first she had to find Sebastian and convince him to return. Since there was no news about him, it was clear he hadn't been caught, and his identity was still unknown. That night, Gwen and Karina quietly broke into Sebastian's apartment. He was shocked to hear their voices. They not only surprised him, but also apologized for Brad's betrayal. They made it clear Brad and Rolf were no longer part of the team. But this time, Sebastian wasn't so easily swayed. That's when Gwen spoke softly. "We'll crack Siegfried, and then we'll go after Götterdämmer. We're going to be legends, Sebastian. This isn't just a mission, it's our destiny." He stayed silent for a while, then finally agreed. But now, things had gotten riskier. Delacroix had figured out Sebastian's identity through his old YouTube videos. He now knew that Gwen's mysterious safe cracker was none other than Sebastian. This was Interpol's last chance to catch them. So Delacroix and his team rushed overnight to the land's St. Moritz casino. Without alerting the casino, he surrounded the area with agents and waited. But even after hours passed, Gwen's team never showed up. Suspicious, Delacroix interrogated the casino manager and learned that someone had tipped them off about an impending heist. The safe had already been relocated to a secure location just hours ago. Shocked, Delacroix raced after the transport truck carrying the safe. Brad and Rolf were also there, unaware of the situation. Brad believed Gwen had betrayed him and was burning with revenge. At this point, the story jumps back 8 hours. The casino had not been warned by the police. It was Corina who had tipped them off. And the truck that came to transport Siegfried? Gwen had hijacked it in advance. She ambushed the drivers, knocked them out, wore their uniforms, and personally picked up the safe. Meanwhile, Corina had already taken care of the snipers, charming them with sweet talk before knocking each of them out cold. And whenever Delacroix tried to check in with his snipers over the radio, Corina played back pre-recorded responses, keeping him completely fooled. Right under his nose, Gwen and Corina had stolen Siegfried, without firing a single shot. Now, Sebastian began carefully turning the dials on Siegfried. There were 7 in total, and he quickly managed to crack the first. Elsewhere, Rolf asked Brad, "Didn't you track Gwen through GPS?" Annoyed, Brad replied, "You think I'm stupid? But just to be sure, he checked again, and this time Gwen's location popped up. Karina, monitoring from the van, saw Brad's phone pop up dangerously close. Alarmed, she stepped outside to investigate, only to be surrounded by Interpol agents. But before they could catch her, she sent Gwen one final message: "Run." Then she quickly threw her phone under a moving car, smashing it beyond recovery. She was caught, but her message had been delivered. Gwen now knew she had to speed up the truck, but there was a problem. Any turbulence made it impossible for Sebastian to work the dials. Even so, he had cracked 4 out of 7. Meanwhile, Delacroix interrogated Corina, but she refused to speak. That's when a female agent offered her a deal. In exchange for revealing Gwen's escape route, they would take full responsibility for Karina's younger brother's education and well-being. After a long pause, Karina finally nodded. Whatever happened now was in fate's hands, because only a miracle could save Gwen from Interpol. Back inside the truck, despite the bumps and shaking, Sebastian unlocked the final dial. Siegfried was cracked. Overcome with excitement, he shouted in triumph, but danger was closing in. Brad and Rolf were now just moments away, and Gwen had no idea how close they really were. In a remote, abandoned area, Gwen pulled the truck over. As always, she packed the money into 2 bags and stepped out. But before she could take another step, Brad was already standing outside, gun pointed right at her. Brad pointed the gun at them and threatened Gwen, "Come with me quietly, or I'll kill this little cricket right here." But Gwen didn't flinch. Furious, Brad aimed straight at Sebastian and pulled the trigger. But nothing happened, because Gwen had secretly removed the firing pin from Brad's gun earlier, back when he killed the security guard. She had done it to make sure he wouldn't take another life. The next second, Gwen turned the tables. She handcuffed both Brad and Rolf inside the truck at gunpoint. Then she placed the bag full of cash in their car and escaped with Sebastian. Within minutes, Interpol arrived. Brad finally fell into Delacroix's hands, and right there, the officer got his long-awaited revenge. After that, the entire unit set out in pursuit of Gwen. Meanwhile, Gwen and Sebastian had almost reached their safe house without any obstacles. That's when Sebastian finally opened his heart and confessed his feelings to Gwen, and Gwen smiled and accepted. But they had no time for romance. They were just minutes away from leaving the country by boat. However, Delacroix caught up to them just before they could leave and aimed his gun at them. Gwen, calm and composed, aimed her gun right back at him, and then she offered him a deal. She would surrender herself, but only if Delacroix let Sebastian go. Delacroix had been chasing Gwen and her crew for years, but he also knew that Sebastian was never a criminal like the rest of them. So, after a moment of silence, Delacroix agreed. He let Sebastian go, but Sebastian refused to leave Gwen behind. He stood firm, protesting again and again. Finally, Gwen shouted at him in anger, forcing him to leave. Left with no choice, Sebastian got on the boat and sailed away. Gwen surrendered herself to Delacroix. A while later, far away from the coast, Sebastian checked the bag Gwen had given him. Inside, he found new passports for the entire team, each with a fresh identity and a plane ticket. Some time passed. In California, we see a woman and a muscular man looking for a skilled safecracker. They arrive at a locksmith shop to inquire, and that's where they meet Sebastian. The moment Sebastian saw the Götterdämmerung emblem in their hands, his eyes lit up. They offered him $500,000 to crack the safe. But what they didn't know, Sebastian would have done it for free, because finding Götterdämmerung had been the purpose of his life for years. And just like that, the legend of Gwen and Sebastian was etched into the shadows of crime and loyalty. They had nothing in the beginning, but together, they rewrote destiny. She gave up her freedom. He found his purpose. But the question is, was it all worth it? Would you sacrifice everything for someone who once saved your soul? If this story gave you chills, make sure to like, share, and subscribe to Recap World, where every tale leaves a mark on your heart. And tell us in the comments, would you choose love or freedom?